little bit around some of the configuration that you can do on the server. So when you come into the Teradata MCP server GitHub repository and you just kind of scroll down through the README, you will see, like we have shown on the installation documents, that you can come into what I think of as step 2 and look at the MCP server documentation. And within the MCP server documentation under the server guide, there is a configuration guide. I'm just going to walk you through what this guide does and show you how that kind of plays out when you want to do certain configurations. So the first thing to understand with environmental variable configurations is the order of precedence, so that if I define something on the command line, then it's going to be used. Whereas if I define something in the environment variable, as long as it's not also defined in the command line, then it's just going to be through the environment variable. You can also define them through a .env file, and the fourth order of precedence is just the default values. And you can see what the default values look like when you kind of look here in the environmental variables. And these exports are just examples of what exporting an environment variable looks like when you're doing it on a Mac. So obviously when you export environmental variables, it looks a little bit different on the PCs, but you get the general idea. So let's quickly run through what each of these variables is doing. So the database URI is really just talking to the location of the Teradata environment. We looked at this when we were doing the install. So, you modify the username, the password of your Teradata database, you put the host address, and you put the default database into the database URI connection. The second one we also saw during the installation is the MCP transport. And whilst standard I/O is the default, streamable HTTP is becoming the default. So, this is probably one that I would see a lot of people changing. The MCP host, when you're running it locally, localhost is the default. But as you start to run this as a server, I would expect this to have a server IP address. Port numbers 8001, whilst the standard is actually the standard for all MCP servers, so you might end up finding that that's already been leveraged, so you might need to go to a port number higher than 8001. And profiles, we're going to talk in a little bit more detail as we get through this particular session here, and we'll talk more to what profiles are, but the default is all. If you are a developer, you might want to be able to change the logging such that the logging is down at the debug level rather than the warning level. This will just give you more information in your log files. Insofar as connecting to Teradata, the ability to change the logging mechanism between Teradata's TD2 default or LDAP or KRB5 or JWT. Now, this needs to be reflected in what it is that your Teradata database authentication is set up to consume. We have TD2 as the default. Then there are three environmental variables that really manage the connection pool between the MCP server and the Teradata platform. So these I don't expect to see you changing, but there may be a need to tune them if your particular needs kind of force that direction. And the last one we're kind of talking to is around the authentication mode of none. The alternative would be basic, and if you move into basic, then these other three ones are going to be potentially a little bit important for you. So needless to say, you could have put all of this into a .env file. This is what a .env file would look like if you had modified it. Or you could have done it in the command line, or you could have exported these variables so that they came into the command line. way that you would expect it to. So the next one is just around profiles. And with profiles, so far as we've done the install videos, we've really used the all profile, but we give you the ability to use a number of different kinds of profiles. And what a profile does is it just limits the number of tools that are available to the MCP server. So, and when you want to change the profile from the default to all, you can do it in the command line using the -- profile and then the name of the profile you want to use, or you can export it, or you can put it inside your .env file, right? So all kind of the same idea. And it is possible to use any one of these built-in profiles, but if these built-in profiles are not quite what you want, then you can build your own custom profile. So if you want to see what the details of the built-in profiles look like, there is the ability here, and my zoom is probably, let's just make that a bit bigger so we can see it. Here's the profiles default file. So it shows you what the example looks like, and this is a YAML file, so spacing and all of those things play out. And what you're actually seeing here with the tools, with the all profile, so name of the profile, and then this is a group within it around the tools, and this is saying I want to be able to see all of the tools. I want to be able to see all of the prompts, except for when the prompt starts with test, and then all of the resources. Whereas if you were to use the tester profile, you would get everything. If you were to use the DBA profile, you would start to limit the number of tools, and there's certain things that go away, and the data science profile's different again. So let's start our server. So we come in here and we go Teradata MCP server, and I'm going to change the default MCP transport to streamable HTTP, and I'm going to keep everything else the same. But in this case, I'm going to start with the all profile, which is something that we've kind of seen before, but let's, start up our server initially with this particular profile, and it will go through the usual process as we saw within the installation. Okay, so interestingly, we forgot to put a database URI in, so I'm going to stop that for a moment. Going to clear that, because if you don't have a database URI, then it is not going to work at all. So let me come back to one that I have built earlier. Streamable HTTP. Okay, so I'm just going to Control C that, clear that. I'm going to export, and here's my database URI. So I'm just going to export the database URI, and then I am going to run my server. So I could have put this database URI into the arguments. This particular time I didn't do it that way. I ran it as an export, so it's an environmental variable, and it'll be available in this session as long as I got like this session. So you can see my server has started up, and I'm just going to use Claude Desktop, because Claude Desktop in this particular case is already been configured to connect to this localhost 8001 endpoint, and we're going to see that the connections happened. I can see that connections happen as soon as those messages there. And if I look at my server, I will see that I have a bunch of security and RAG and SQL and DBA and quality and feature store. And so I have a lot of different tools here, right? So what we're going to do now is show what it looks like if I quit out of here and I stop my server. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my server, and I'm going to, rather than have all, I'm going to have the DBA profile. Now, in this particular case, server starts, if I come into my client will connect, and let's just come back here and we sort of say, so DBA, we're expecting to see DBA tools, base tools, and security tools, but that's all we're expecting to see. So if we have a look at our tools, we can see we've got DBA tools, we've got base tools, and we've got security tools and some more DBA tools. So you can see that the profile is kind of working the way that we would expect it to work. So I'm going to come out of here again, quit on this guy. I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to stop my server again, clear it out. And now this time what I want to do is I want to create my own profile. And you'll see that I have already built this profiles.yaml file in here. So let's have a look at profiles.yaml. And you will notice that in my profile.yamls, I've called it Daniel. I've got only going to be filtering on tools, and I'm only going to have base tools. So pretty simple profiles.yaml. Now I will caution you that you need to make sure it is called profiles.yaml, YML. So the name matters. And you will find in YAML files that spacing matters. So spacing determines how a YAML file actually has a hierarchy. And then within our filtering, it uses regedit syntax. So whatever you can do in regedit, you can do inside this syntax as far as filtering is concerned. So I'm going to come out of my profiles here. And if I come back to my profiles, as long as this profiles is in the directory where you're running your server. So if I come back over here and I go with Daniel as my profile, I'm now expecting my profile to come up, and I am expecting that when it connects, and we will see the connection happening on the left there, and I'm now expecting there only to be base tools, and you can see that there's only base tools. So the beauty of profiles is it gives you kind of a way of being able to really reduce the number of tools that a server is making available to a client. We see this as being hugely valuable when you start building custom tools, and that would be a different video. But when you build custom tools and you have a very focused kind of application that you're making available to your user community, then you really want to restrict the tools down that are available within the server. So with that, we will come back to our profiles, which we saw in here, and we have worked through the different kind of profile capabilities. We talked about how I gave my profile a name. In my case, it was called Daniel, and I decided which sort of profiles I wanted to have available in there. So with that, I'm going to stop this particular video, and thank you very much.